Republicans won't get elected Dogcatcher in 2026 if the Trump tax cuts are not extended. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Executive Director with Americans for Limited Government and Americans for Limited Government Foundation. Hit that subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking about President Donald Trump. He went to the Congress today and spoke with House Republicans about the very important need to pass the Trump tax cuts, to extend them. On December 31st, taxes are going to increase on 80% of Americans. And unless House Republicans and Senate Republicans act on the Budget Reconciliation One Big Beautiful Bill Act, taxes are going to go up and Republicans will basically be a failure. And it's no skin off Donald Trump's nose. He's term limited. He's in his second term, but Republicans in Congress will be up for election in 2026 and they will pay a dear price at the polls from the American people if they disenfranchise the 77 million Americans who voted for President Donald Trump and majorities in the House and the Senate to, among other things, extend and expand the Trump tax cuts, including no taxes on tips, overtime, providing tax relief for Social Security for senior citizens who are collecting Social Security right now. I think that this is very important constituencies. This is one of the big reasons that President Trump was reelected. It also includes $46 billion to build the border wall. Remember the border wall? President Trump couldn't get any funding for the border wall from Congress. Well, this Congress has a budget that gives $47 billion almost to President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security to finish the border wall. We couldn't get Paul Ryan to put 2 bricks in the border wall, but we got Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader Thune. They're putting up legislation right now that will finish the border wall. So I think that's an important provision as well. But I wanted you to hear from President Trump himself. He was coming out of a meeting with House Republicans, and this is what he had to say to reporters just as he came out.
We have a very, very united party. This man has done a fantastic job, and so have you, Lisa. But this man has done a fantastic job. He's a real unifier. I don't think anybody else could have done it. We had, I just said to your cohorts downstairs, we had a majority of 1 for a period of 5 months. And he kept it together, and we actually passed things. Nobody else could have done it. He's done a fantastic job as Speaker. We have a very, very unified party. Remember, we had 1, and now we have 7. We won elections. Now we're going to win a lot of elections. The economy is good. I just had my highest poll numbers ever. And we had a big trip to the Middle East. We took in $5.1 trillion. We brought it back to our country. 180 Boeing aircraft are being built now because of that trip and many other things. That's the least of it. The economy is doing great. The stock market's higher now than when I came to office. And we've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff money, and we've had no inflation. They kept saying inflation. There's no inflation. Groceries are down. Gasoline is way down, way down. Everything is down. All energy costs are down. I'll tell you, to me, maybe the most respected thing, you saw the way they respected me between Qatar and Saudi Arabia and UAE, probably the richest, certainly the richest of their type nation, great place, unbelievable amounts of money. They respect our country again. They were going to go to China. China was going to take over those countries 100%. They were dealing with China because they weren't treated right by the last administration. And they have tremendous economic power. They have more money than anybody. We probably have more money, but we have other things like this. They are very, very cash rich, to put it mildly. And they're spending 5.1 trillion. Probably it's going to be 7 trillion by the time we stop. And, somebody said every other president goes and leaves and spends money, gives other countries money. I'm the only one that goes and takes money back. When you think of it, I said, that's an interesting statement. I never thought of it that way. But we have this is really just a pep talk. We have a very unified House, and we have a very unified Senate. And Mike is doing a phenomenal job as Speaker. He's going to be there a long time. And we have a man in the Senate, our leader, Thune. Mr. Thune is doing a great job. I've gotten to like him a lot, and he's doing a fantastic job. Between the two guys, very different personalities, actually, in certain ways, but they are doing a fantastic job. I don't think the Republican Party has ever been so unified. It's become a much bigger party.
So there's President Trump speaking on Capitol Hill following his meeting with House Republicans, where he's urging them. He says it's a little bit of a pep talk. I think, yeah, they could use a little bit of a pep talk because right now Republicans only have 4 votes to spare in the House of Representatives right now as far as this goes. So you can see the one big, beautiful bill. Well, it can go down the tubes if just 4 Republicans in the House were to vote no. So we're going to talk about my piece here. President Trump says we have a very, very united party. And that's his description to reporters after addressing the House Republican Conference today on the political state of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that will extend and expand the 2017 Trump tax cuts, including no income taxes on tips and overtime, plus the boosted deduction for seniors. It also puts $46.5 billion towards the border wall and removes Medicaid from 1.4 million illegal aliens as a pay for. The House is currently now composed of 220 Republicans and 213 Democrats following the 2024 elections. Here's that total right here. You can see 435 is the amount of members in the House, 220 to 213. 2 are vacant. Sadly, that's because 2 Democrats died while in office. Sylvester Turner and Raul Grijalva both died this past March, and there will be special elections held later this year in September in Arizona 7 and in November for Texas 18th congressional district. It's actually Republicans coming into 2025 only had a 3-seat threshold where they would lose a bill. Now it's up to 4 seats because of these 2 vacancies. So just giving you the math here, how many votes do Republicans have to lose in the House of Representatives? It gives them 4 votes to spare if Republican members vote in opposition, they vote with the Democrats, or up to 6 votes to spare if Republican members who don't want to vote for it merely vote present or didn't vote. So you're at 220. If you go down by 6 votes on present, you're still 214 to 213. So you can still get stuff done if the Republican members who are in opposition were to merely vote present. Otherwise, you can only spare just 4 votes, taking it down from 220 to really to 216. And you really can't spare more than 4 votes here. You lose 4 votes, it's pretty much over. Now, Trump's talk with House Republicans came after a contentious weekend wherein the bill failed at the House Budget Committee before the 4 Republican opponents, Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, Andrew Clyde, and Josh Breachin, abstained, allowing the legislation to proceed to the House Rules Committee. And we have that piece here from Congressional, well, actually, I guess it's just called Roll Call. I was going to say Congressional Quarterly, but it's actually, this is just from Roll Call. House Budget Panel approves reconciliation on second try. The holdouts who blocked the bill in Friday's budget panel, Josh Breachin, Andrew Clyde, Ralph Norman, and Chip Roy, were satisfied enough with the changes promised to them during weekend negotiations. They allowed the package to move forward by voting present, enabling the panel to report out the bill on a 17 to 16 party line vote. I'm excited about the changes that were made, Norman said before the vote. But it quickly became apparent the negotiations weren't over. Shortly after the vote, Roy and the broader Freedom Caucus leadership issued statements expressing dissatisfaction with the state of play, even as they acknowledged the progress made over the weekend. The measure, quote, does not yet meet the moment, their statement said, arguing more must be done to wring savings out of Medicaid and roll back green energy subsidies enacted during the Biden administration. Democrats repeatedly pleaded with a majority of Republicans for information on what changes have been made. The only reason this vote passed tonight is because they've plotted behind closed doors to hurt even more families while refusing to share this backroom deal with the American people. Well, backroom deal or no, right now it's on very thin ice in terms of you only have a few votes to spare in the House of Representatives. If we get it across the finish line, maybe the Senate should just pass it and send it on to President Trump. But we'll go back to my piece here. So this is more than enough members to sink the legislation should they vote no again. But have they thought through the implications? So Republicans are, if these 4 members, if they all vote no from the Budget Committee, well, that would just be enough to kill the bill right there. The National Taxpayers Union has found that income taxes will increase on 80% of Americans if the Trump tax cuts expire. And that's not good because the Public Opinion Strategies American for Prosperity poll conducted April 10 to April 14 found 80% of voters think it would be a really bad time to raise taxes, which makes sense after peak inflation of 9.1% in June 2022. You see that the American people will have higher prices than their incomes. And so incomes are less than inflation for much of the Biden presidency. The last thing they need right now is a big tax increase at the end of the year, especially since President Trump and the House and Senate swept the 2024 elections in part on the promise to extend and expand the Trump tax cuts, including no tax on tips, Social Security, and overtime. Now, on budget reconciliation, there's actually points of order that will prevent a full exemption from the no tax on Social Security. So what they're doing is they're doing an expanded deduction for seniors because you can't touch Social Security directly in the budget reconciliation, unfortunately. I think they'd like to. It's just that the Budget Control Act doesn't provide for it. Here, I'll show you. Social Security. In the Senate, Section 301I prohibits consideration of a budget resolution that would decrease the surplus. Let's see. And also 310G prohibits consideration that contains recommendations with respect to Social Security. So basically anything that mentions Social Security. And 313B, anything that recommends changes to Social Security. And these would all take basically, here's one, 311A3. Prohibits consideration of legislation that would cause a decrease in surpluses or an increase in Social Security deficits, so on and so forth. So if you were to, if you look it up, the amount of money that is raised from taxes from Social Security is about $50.7 billion. So a straight up exemption, that would put a hole in the trust fund. So what are they doing? They're going to still collect the tax, but they're going to do a deduction such that when you get a tax refund, it won't come out of the trust fund. It'll come out of the general fund, and that would provide for probably more borrowing. But this is all being offset by spending cuts, for example, taking 1.4 million illegal aliens off of Medicaid. In any event, the American people are expecting the president's agenda to get enacted. That's what they voted for. But with only 53 Senate Republicans, they don't have the votes to pass their agenda under regular order, 60 vote threshold to overcome a filibuster. So like in 2001, 2003, and 2017, Republicans are depending on budget reconciliation to get the tax cuts done. And it, by the rules, cannot achieve every single goal. As I mentioned, the no tax on Social Security has had to be modified. And so what are they doing instead? So we're going to do no income taxes on tips, no income taxes on overtime, and then a bigger deduction for all seniors. Anyone above the age of 65, they're already collecting Social Security. Well, you can still cut their taxes. You could still provide tax relief to seniors, but under budget reconciliation, not everything that we would like to do or that the American people would like to see happen can actually all be passed. But the one big beautiful bill is surely accomplishing a lot of that. And so I'd recently done a piece prior to the bill being released about where's no tax on tips overtime. One consistent theme by President Trump on the campaign trail in swing states like Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania was his tax proposals to not only extend the Trump tax cuts, but also no taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security. This was thought to be pivotal, particularly to Trump's victory in Nevada, where there is a disproportionate number of tip workers. More than 5% of Nevada workers are in tip jobs, according to the Tax Policy Center. And that's greater than the national average, which is about 2%. or about 3.3 million tip workers nationwide. And Trump defeated former Vice President Kamala Harris by 46,000 votes, 751,000 to 705,000, or 50.6% to 47.5%. Politically, then, congressional Republicans have a very high incentive to at least get no tax on tips done, for if they fail, the 2026 campaign commercials almost write themselves that Trump promised no tax on tips, had majorities in Congress to accomplish it, but then Republicans failed to deliver. They'd be flirting with political disaster in the 2026 midterms, you think? But the same could be said of no tax on overtime. There, 15% of workers nationwide are eligible for overtime pay under the Fair Labor Standards Act, according to the dataforprogress.org. That's more than 20 million Americans. Nothing to sneeze at there. These are huge constituencies that Trump was talking to. And then there's no tax on Social Security. There are 61 million Americans 65 years and older, about 23% of the 262 million voting age population. So the proposal to cut taxes for such a significant chunk of the population could be thought to have also been pivotal to Trump's win in 2024. In the 2024 CNN exit poll, for example, Trump narrowly beat Harris among 65 years old and older, 50% to 49%. For the first two, no taxes on tips and overtime, that should be doable under budget reconciliation, although Republicans still have to find so-called paid fors. And that's going to be the spending decreases and cuts like removing illegal aliens from Medicaid. But Social Security, again, can't be directly impacted by budget reconciliation. We went through the points of order. If Social Security were made exempt from taxes, that would come $51 billion out of the trust fund. So instead, they're doing a deduction so that instead it comes out of the general fund. And it should be about $450, I think, on average. Basically fewer taxes. I think I calculated this number, 51 billion across the amount of seniors, 61 million. And I think I came up with $825 on average taxes paid per senior citizen. But not every senior was paying taxes on their Social Security because they didn't come up to the income threshold. So what to do? If Social Security cannot be impacted directly, then they're going to do a deduction. You could do also a tax credit. That's another way to deal with it. They opted for a deduction. We'll see what the final version holds. Taxes would still be collected. Let's see here. In any event, besides extending the Trump tax cuts, the tax proposals the American people were most familiar with in 2024 when they voted for President Trump were his campaign promises for no taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security, impacting more than 80 million Americans. Politically, it's really simple. It's no skin off Trump's nose if he is term limited and he can't run again. Whereas if Republicans wanted to get credit from those 80 million Americans when they run for re-election in 2026, they'll keep all of Trump's promises on taxes, and if they want to be blamed, they won't. It's just time to deliver. I think that's just kind of common sense. You know, Republicans ran on cutting taxes. They should probably pass the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that does so. At the end of the day, nothing will be perfect, and now it is up to President Trump, House and Senate leaders to continue consulting with members to work through every objection. If more tax relief is needed, then provide more tax relief. Those are, and if we need we need more spending cuts, then do that. Those are two things the American people support. The less we spend, the less we should be taxed. Again, on December 31st, if nothing is done, taxes will automatically increase on most Americans. They were promised if President Trump won and Republicans had elected majorities, taxes would not go up. If the American people had wanted taxes to go up, they could have just voted for Kamala Harris. Politically, the consequences of not getting the legislation done would be congressional Republicans, despite winning the popular vote, the White House, the House, and the Senate could not deliver on their promises to the American people, disenfranchising 77 million voters. If that's the record members want to run on in 2026, then do nothing. But if members want to run on tax cuts, border security, and fiscal sanity, then come together, make the compromises that are necessary, be mindful that it will never be perfect, and then pass it. Elections have consequences, and one of them is to keep your promises, or voters will remember. This is Robert Romano, Executive Director with Americans for Limited Government and Americans for Limited Government Foundation. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good evening. And we got one chat here. Let's see. Mike Smith says, resistance is futile. Make America great again. FAFO. What's that mean? I think we can look it up later. Again, this is Robert Romano, Executive Director with Americans for Limited Government and Americans for Limited Government Foundation. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, call your member of Congress and tell them to pass the Trump tax cuts, to extend them, to expand them, to keep their promises, or they won't get elected Dogcatcher in 2026. Tell them I said that. Have a good evening.